Hi, I'm Michelle Paganini. I'm an upcycle guru and owner of Paganunu. What I'm going to share with you today is a special technique for matching patterns on fabric and dealing with something called a repeat. So a repeat is a motif that occurs in a pattern that can go across the fabric and then down the length of the fabric. And when you're calculating how much yardage you need to understand what the repeat is and buy extra fabric so you're able to match. If you look at the garments behind me, one of the reasons that they look good, and this is often true with dress shirts and the one I have on, is the pattern is matched exactly. Even the pinstripe is matched exactly. If it was off by a quarter of an inch, the garment wouldn't look as good. So how do we go about doing this? Well, first you need to understand what the repeat is. It's where the pattern matches. So if I kind of slide this up and down, you can see clearly there's not a match right here. Well, I've cheated and I've marked exactly where it matches so that I can show you. And I also went ahead and measured the repeat. This is a very big repeat because it's like upholstery fabric. So if you look at the red arrow here, it goes all the way almost to the front of the table. That's almost 25 inches long. And then across, here's a repeat where it's the same motif occurs again on the other side. And that one is almost 19 inches long. So you would have to get a lot of extra fabric if you're gonna match this pattern. And then once you match it, you're just gonna pin it in place. And I'll show you my secret technique in a minute. So let's look at a smaller print fabric and see what that looks like. This is one of my favorite fabrics. I just have this little tiny bit of scrap left. And I looked for a repeat going up and down. This one's about, 12 inches long, I think. So let's see what it looks like when it's matched up, and then I'm actually gonna show you my technique on this one. So what I've done is I have turned under the edge of the fabric, and that's really important. That's the key thing about the technique I'm gonna show you. And then I pinned and boxed in where it matches, but you wanna look at what the repeated motifs are. Like right here, I have a set of cherries, and that set of cherries recurs down here, where I actually matched it. There we go. It doesn't, but you can see where I'm matching. So you need to play around with it and figure out where it is so that you can match it up. And in this case, since I have it pinned in, it's pretty easy to find. I can see a stem right here, right there. I want to pin it precisely because it's going to look funny if that doesn't match. And another one right here. I'm going to sew this with a contrast thread so you're going to be able to see exactly what I'm doing. But every couple inches as I go through, I'm making sure that that pin's no good, that it's going to match up exactly. I'm looking at the edges of the cherry here. And then continuing to go down, because it can shift a little bit as we move through. Shifting it down just 1/16 of an inch makes a difference right here. Get the pins out that I had underneath. And that's enough to show you the technique that I'm talking about. So notice that I don't have right side to right side. I'm not stitching on the wrong side. I'm gonna top stitch, and that way I can control exactly what's happening with the pattern match as I sew through. So I'm gonna stitch really close to the edge, and I'm gonna watch very carefully as I go through to make sure that it's still aligned. Let's get these out of the way so you can see well. And I'm making sure it hasn't shifted as I go through. If I see it drifting, one thing I can do to control it is to pull the fabric up a little bit so that it keeps it from moving forward as it does when you don't have on a special foot. And I have shifting already. So what I would do in this case, I'm gonna keep going. What I would do in this case is I would rip a little of the stitching out and I would back up and I would start over again. It's actually matching a little bit further on, and I can hold it with a pin too to get it to go through and stay put. It's actually looking pretty good. Okay, that's enough to show you what it looks like. Perfect match for the stem. For the edge of the cherry. For the stem, that's where it drifted a little bit, and I was talking about I would probably rip that out and scoot it back just a little bit. Have a little bit of drift right here. This one's perfectly matched, so you can see how much of a help it is to be doing it top stitching, because you can really see what's going on. I'd probably be going a little slower if I weren't talking on TV and looking at it very carefully. And the technique I was talking about to keep it from shifting forward is to hold it like this when you're stitching. So that's the technique. It works super well. And now I'm going to go on to the pink one. It's a stripe, so there isn't a double repeat. It only is a stripe going across. And I want to show you what I did right here. I sewed it right sides together, so I sewed it from the wrong side, and it's a very short length that I'm sewing. However, if you look at it, the stripes perfectly matched right here, and I had it pinned very well. And as I went further down, it drifted a little bit further apart. So if you look at the difference between how this one's aligned and how the one on the bottom is aligned, you can see how much it shifted, and it makes a big difference when it's a small print like this. One way to solve it, besides doing the top stitching that I'm talking about, is if you happen to have a walking foot. A walking foot makes the feed even on the machine. Without a walking foot, the top tends to scooch forward just a little bit more than the bottom, and that's what has it be misaligned. So walking foot is a good investment. If you're doing top stitching, like I just showed you, there's a little bit more control. I have it pinned very carefully at all these stages, so I would avoid what happens when it's drifting. And you really can't see when you're stitching from the wrong side how it's going to turn out. Another thing to look for is when you're pinning it, it's tempting to pin and match the stripe up right at the very edge, but that's not actually where you're stitching. So what you want to do is you want to pin it further back, even if you're not stitching from the top side. You want to pin it further back so you're pinning on the stitch line, not on the edge, because there can be drift from it matching right here to matching at the stitch line. And that's how easy it is to match patterns with top stitching.